welcome. Thank you all for coming. We do not have physical copies of the budget to hand out. I made about 10 if you need one for reference, but we are going to be going through the process and showing you how we came to the decisions that we made. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. Is it not working? Oh, do I need to turn?
Hi, I'm Gail. I'm sorry to interrupt the process. Oh, you haven't lit the chalice yet. Oh, shoot. I know this is a budget meeting, but I've been gone for a couple weeks, and I didn't see or hear public recognition of all the work that the stewardship committee did. And so I just want to say, for my 30 years here at the church, we've raised the most in this year than ever before. And I thought we should at least give a cheer or a clap or something for the stewardship work. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Are you all ready for me to light the chalice? So we'll light our chalice with these words that are from Val Weller. Money is simply energy and nothing more. Money can be stuffed in a mattress or kept in an offshore bank account to provide a sense of security or to move us just a bit closer to that ever elusive sense of enough. Money can also be used to do great good in the world. I believe that this church changes lives for the better, and we are just getting started. We need to be a congregation of stewards who understand that the church needs our strong support in order to fulfill our shared mission of transforming ourselves and transforming the world.
All right. The first slide is going to show you some information for today. Last year, our charitable giving and how we ended the period, and share where we are this year as far as our revenue and expenses, what's in our reserve accounts, the status of our endowment, and an overview of the budget development process. And Reverend Mary, I don't have access to the notes.
Yeah, we can't see those either, for the record.
Other things we're covering today, this is just for the records, an update on stewardship, the response to the Bridge the Gap meeting, in addition to the letter that went out in the Spark, review our priorities and decisions for the budget, and review the proposed budget for July 2024 to June 2025. And this is the budget that is going to be brought before the congregation for a vote at the annual meeting next week at 11:45 in the morning.
So So Arlene, I'm sorry you don't have access to the notes or the tech team. I'm not sure why I do and you don't, but here we go. So I have these next few, Arlene, and then I'll turn it over to you when it's your time. So I want to speak just a few minutes about about the previous budget year. This was July of 2022 through June of 2023. And this was the first complete budget year that we had on the new calendar of July through June. Sorry, it should have been switched. And we ended that year with more revenue than expenses, which was a good thing. And because we had drawn on savings and reserves in order to balance that budget, it just meant that we didn't have to draw on as much as previously, as we had previously thought. If you want some specifics on that, I'm happy to share them, and you know, I can give that to you, and won't take the time to do that now. So looking at the next slide, then, if we could, that's about the charitable giving for July 2022 through June 2023. Looks like I have the dates wrong there, so sorry about that. So it's July 2022 through June of 2023. The total amount of charitable giving from the congregation was almost $41,000. The bulk of that was Share the Plate, which was more than we had budgeted. The book sale gave a generous amount to 3 worthy charities. The Minister's Benevolence Fund continues to be robust and help people in the community and in the congregation, and then some other things. We also had a Raise the Paddle in the auction last year that raised a scholarship for General Assembly. We used $300 of that scholarship money to send delegates to General Assembly last year, and we've also used money from that fund to send delegates for OUUC to General Assembly this year. If I could have the next slide then. This is the charitable giving so far for this year, and you'll see with a total of $47,600, we're already above the amount that the congregation raised for charitable giving last year, which is a wonderful thing. The book sale is taking the lead right now, raised significantly more this year for 3 worthy charities again. The Share the Plate is a little bit behind, but that's because the year isn't done yet. These numbers are through April, so we'll have Share the Plate for May and June as well that will add to this, and I fully expect we'll be at what we budgeted or more. And again, the Minister's Benevolence Fund is active. The congregation raised $6,000 for UNICEF for Raise the Paddle at the auction this year. That will go for relief in Gaza. And also raised $6,500 for OUUC Tech for some things that we've already got going in the congregation. So again, our charitable giving is looking good. So Arlene, I'm gonna switch this over to you then for the next 2 slides.
All right. So as of April this year, which is the last complete financial report, our expenses exceeded our revenues by just over $8,600. We had a very successful auction proceeds that are not yet accounted for in April, and we raised almost $4,500 more than budgeted. And pledges coming in have slowed, and we are behind on pledge fulfillment. So please send in those pledged payments, or just let us know if you are unable to do so. There are 12 members who had not pledged for the current year, and unless we hear from them that they wish to remain members or just cannot pledge, they may be dropped from the membership of the congregation. You must pledge or ask for a waiver to stay a member of OUUC, and waivers are granted. Okay. In our unrestricted accounts, we have a general operating reserve of $47,455. That's about 1 month of operating expenses. Operating expenses includes things like salaries, electric, just basic, just maintaining our operations here. The bulk of it is salaries and benefits. We also have an account that we're calling Legacy Gifts that is unrestricted gifts to the congregation. It right now consists mostly of a bequest by George Lanning's estate. This money is unrestricted for the congregation to use as it's needed. And we're honoring George's wishes by leaving it in that state.
So these next,
Accounts that are also restricted. So we have funds for piano maintenance. The sabbatical reserve is going to pay for guest speakers and expenses related to Reverend Mary's sabbatical when she's gone from us. There is a reserve for Healthy Congregation Team to do what they do, and there is always a reserve for ministerial transition, because eventually ministers retire. So we have to prepare for the expenses that are going to occur in the event of that retirement. In our capital funds accounts, there is $12,000, which is board designated for the building major maintenance fund. And then there is a capital campaign fund still of $53,398. Yes, Reverend Mary.
thank you, Arlene. I just wanted to add a few things about the capital campaign fund, if you don't mind. So the capital campaign fund has about $53,000 in it. You might recall that the capital campaign kicked off in December of 2022, and it's a 3-year campaign. We're about halfway through. It will go through December of 2025. So there are still pledges that are coming in and commitments that are coming in, and there are commitments that are still owed. We've so far used the capital campaign funds to pay off the mortgage. That was last summer. So that's a yay. The mortgage is done and OUC is debt-free. We used the capital campaign funds along with some funds from George Lanning's bequest to finish the HVAC upgrade that happened last summer. And then there are plans to use the capital campaign to repair the front steps. Those are the steps that lead down to the sanctuary entrance doors. Take a look at those. They're in pretty rough shape. And we have sought quotes for new key card access and security for the security cameras for the building, so that we have an upgrade in security. So that's what's happening from that fund, the generosity of your capital campaign donations and what's planned for the future. And then if we could go to the
Thank you,
next.
Reverend Mary.
Sure. So do you mind if I do the next one, Arlene? Okay, we'll go back to you for the endowment, Arlene. So the other reserve accounts that we have, these are donor restricted funds, which means that these funds have been specifically raised for a purpose designated by the donor. There's a choir and music fund that comes from concerts that the choir does. The partner church raises money to send to Kisholamos, our partner church in Romania. There is an auction community fund, and these are the donations that you all generously give to help people who want to participate in the auction and may not have the funds to do so. There's a Warm Windows Fund, there is a nursery fund, and then of course the GA scholarships that I mentioned earlier. So before we move on to talking about the endowment and the budget process, I wonder if we could just pause for a moment and see if there are any questions about the charitable giving or the reserve funds that we've talked about so far.
Hands in the sanctuary. Yes, we do have a hand in the sanctuary.
I don't think it's exactly what you just asked.
Hold closer. No, I can't. She's going to check the mic. Make sure.
Hello, there we go.
My question is, what do we do with the money from the auction? And I know that doesn't answer your Reverend Mary's direct question, but that's what I want to know.
So if I can answer that, the money for the auction is specifically raised for the OUUC operational budget. That's been the case historically, and that's the case now. There are two things. There are two things outside of the auction revenues, which are raise the paddle, and those go for specific purposes. As I mentioned, last year it was GA scholarships. This year it was charitable relief to Gaza and funding OUUC Tech. So the accounting for the auction looks like the first things that get paid are the expenses of the auction, and then what's left goes into OUUC operations. Does that answer your question?
Well, hi, Steve Tilley. I'm wondering, are there definitions for the Building Major Maintenance Fund and the that other capital fund that were listed together with it, and what they're for and what the differences are between them?
Mm-hmm. So thanks for the question, Steve. The Building Major Maintenance Fund is a fund that has existed for a long time, is my understanding. It existed when I got here. And when I arrived, it was the only fund that was for capital expenses. And so lots of things came out of that. With the Capital Campaign Fund, what we've been using the Building Major Maintenance Fund for is things that are unexpected that come up that aren't a part of the budget. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing a better job of putting regular things into the annual budget, like the several $1,000s that it takes to mow around the retaining pond. Well, we have to do that every year. That should be part of the annual budget. So the Building Major Maintenance Fund are for things that come up that we didn't account for that might need to be replaced or maintained. So an example of that might be, let's say the oven in the kitchen goes out, we might use the Building Major Maintenance Fund then to replace the oven. So I don't know that it's as clear cut as it might like to be. What our intention has been is the Building Major Maintenance Fund is kind of our emergency reserve. The Capital Campaign Fund is intentionally used for the capital expenses that we know are coming up from that were identified in the reserve study that was done. And just if it helps with the discernment of that, the board has given me and the staff authorization to spend from the Building Major Maintenance Fund. The board is responsible for approving any expenses from the Capital Campaign Fund. Does that help, Steve?
Hi, this is Jean Mine, and I'm wondering on the 1 month in reserve for operating, that seems pretty slim. Is that just based on total available funds? You can only put a month in there? I'm just thinking about my own personal budget. That would make me nervous.
Well, Jean, we've had some discussions about that on the finance consulting team. And what I'll say is that it's a lot more than it used to be. It used to be a lot less than that, and what we decided was 1 month of operating expenses was a good amount to have. It could be more, and I'll also say that OUUC has savings and we have an endowment fund. So the challenge that we have, of course, is to not have so much in our reserves and savings that we can't fund our operations. And how do we keep that balance? So we decided 1 month was probably a good place to land. I can appreciate your concern that we might need more. If something really catastrophic happened, we would be looking for, other sources and grants and loans and such probably anyway. That reserve is simply for, if we're having cash flow difficulties or something comes up that we need help managing.
Are there any questions online? All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. All right, so this is our endowment, the OUUC endowment. Our current balance as of 4/30 was $501,000. In May, we drew out $16,234 for this year's budget. It was in the budget that we passed last year. So currently, the balance in the OUUC endowment is sitting at $485,166. This size of endowment, it is expected to appreciate in value by about 8%. So taking 4% a year, we're not ever sliding backwards. It should keep growing. Now, the budget development process. Do I have that slide, Reverend Mary, or do you? Okay. Oh, it's confirming that it's me. All right. That's good. Well, so the first thing that happens is in December, January of last year, Reverend Mary got together with the various teams and staff to consider about what will be needed to meet our vision and mission to plan for the next year, starting in the next July. So they're meeting in December, planning for the next year to start about 6 months later. Okay? And they develop a budget request to support their aspirations. Reverend Mary then consults with staff and members of the financial consulting team to prepare an aspirational budget to determine the amount of the stewardship request. So this is kind of a tight schedule. Then the board reviews and determines the stewardship request and activates the stewardship team. The stewardship campaign team, I should say. We are looking to have the stewardship team active longer in the year than just the 2 months of the campaign, because stewardship, as you know, is a year-long activity. The board reviews and determines the stewardship request. I just said that. And then we actually have the stewardship campaign in March and April. So we have the campaign. So what did we get of the ask? And what's the gap, the budget gap? So Reverend Mary reviews the projected pledges, consults with staff, and then drafts a budget to align and adjust if needed. That's April and May. And then she brings this adjusted budget to the board, and we discuss the gap between the request and the pledges, and then what are our priorities for aligning our revenue and expenses. And this happens in April and May. And then Reverend Mary prepares and presents a proposed budget to the board in May. So we review her budget, And this year, we made some amendments to Reverend Mary's budget, and then we voted on that budget to present to you for a vote. And then we bring this to you to vote on next week. So the budget has been posted on the website. Oh, this is the thank you to the amazing stewardship team. Those of you who are in the room, please stand up and take your bows. It's Carmel, Karen, Zoe, and Teresa. Teresa's back there with the headphones on, busy making things work as usual. So here are some numbers. So as of 5/25/24, we have pledged $495,518. That's almost $50,000 more than last year, the largest amount ever in a pledge drive. After we assume a 97% pledge fulfillment gives us a working budget that we feel we can plan on of $480,652, and that is 87% of our stewardship goal. So here's some numbers of the average per pledge. It has gone up, you can see, over the last 3 years. If you consider that inflation is up 8%, our pledge increase from this last year to this year, the average pledge is not an 8% increase, but it is more than it was last year. Those who pledged this year gave 4% more on average, and we have more new pledges and many more non-member pledges. So here are some numbers courtesy of Karen Landisberg. Come on, raise your hand, Data Queen. She is the Data Queen. And she pulls weeds. I hear she bakes bread too, so. All right, so in 2021, you can see we had 256 pledgers. That's a pledging unit. A couple may pledge as a unit, or they may individually pledge. Each pledge is considered a pledger. In the transition year, we had 246 pledgers. From 22-23, 249. 23-24, we went down to 232. And last year, we know we had some folks who were confused because we just had a 6-month pledge drive, which was that transition. And then we also had a capital campaign in 2022. So once that was all over with, last year, 232 pledging units, and this year, at the very end of the pledge drive, after it was officially closed, we got our numbers up to 243 pledging units. We gained 11 over last year. So thank you all very, 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 very much. Our average pledge increased. Donors stepped up even more. We see our newer members are even more financially invested, and new pledgers accounted for almost 9% of the total pledged. Non-member pledgers increased from 32 to 51 and accounted for 12% of the total pledged. And those with the lowest pledges increased their pledges the most. So folks got the message. When we have a budget gap, we do hear it and we respond. So here's some of our harder news. The number of pledgers has increased, but it's still not at previous levels. The number of members has decreased to 275, and the number of friends has increased. There are 20 members we haven't heard from yet this year, so our member number may go down more if they don't pledge or ask for a exemption, a waiver. You may need to check with Rosie next week if you're not sure if you're still a member. Only members can vote next week in the annual meeting. So our pledges are still less than our stewardship request. It's a smaller gap than last year. But we have some priorities jointly developed by Reverend Mary and the board. And one of the things, I'm going to say it first because it's listed third on the slide, but we want to cover our operating costs through stewardship pledges and fundraising and minimize or even eliminate the use of one-time funds for operating costs. So we are on a path to reduce the amount of one-time funds that we use every year till we get to zero. We would like to get to zero. But for this year's budget, we prioritized people, at least maintain staff, if not add and pay staff as fairly as possible. And we want to increase our congregant engagement. I'm going to have to turn it over to Reverend Mary.
Thanks, Arlene.
The question was, I'm going to go back a slide. What does it mean, increase congregant engagement?
It looks like you're wanting me to address that, Arlene? Okay. So that means a number of different things, and it was a robust conversation with the board, as I recall, in December. The bigger picture is increased engagement of people in the life of the congregation. So, and the ways we do that are, vibrant Sunday mornings and our Thursday evening community dinners and all of the events that follow. And so really wanting to support those programs so that folks can stay engaged. Wanting to encourage people to volunteer or find ways to contribute to the life of the congregation while they're getting their needs met. And then I know that for the stewardship team, there was a strong sense of needing to connect with people, to bring people together in person and online, and to increase engagement between members of the congregation at the same time. So those are the things I would say that I recall from the board discussion and the stewardship drive. Arlene or Carmel, I wonder if there's something you might want to add to that.
No, thank you, Reverend Mary. I appreciate that. I had to cough, so I appreciate you answering that question.
This is Jean Mine again. In light of that, what is being done to approach the 20 people who are members who have not pledged?
So Jean,
Our treasurer makes phone calls and emails, and many folks have not replied or they don't answer the phone. So where are we?
Okay, so Arlene, I think you wanted me to talk about what we did to balance the budget then, or to at least bring it into some alignment. We looked at our revenue assumptions and we increased the amount that would be raised by the auction next year and the amount of interest income Jeff Goltz, the OUUC treasurer, has been very active in investing the savings that OUUC has in CDs and money market accounts and bringing in interest that we wouldn't have otherwise. We cut our UUA dues from the fair share request of $24,000 to $10,000. It's less than we paid in 22-23, but it's more than we paid this year. And sometimes folks wonder if that changes any of the services that we receive from the UUA, and it doesn't. The fair share is based on our operating budget, and and the assumption is that as a covenanted community, a covenanted congregation of the UUA, we would pay as much toward our fair share as we are able. We reduced the amount that almost every program will get from the amount that was requested. And most programs will receive at least what they received this year for programming. A few are higher. The music budget was just on life support this last year, and we've really done with using RE supplies that have, been around for quite a long time. And so we know that the music budget and the RE budget in particular needed some more funding for this next year. So that's what that looks like. So those are the things that we did in order to help balance things. And then Arlene, this next slide is about the Bridging the Gap board forum, so I'll let you address that one. And then it'll come back to me, I think.
I have copies of the letter that went out to the congregation about the Bridging the Gap presentation on May 5th, and they're up on the piano. One thing we did not include in that letter was a specific response to ideas that came up during the presentation. One of the recurring themes that came up was, can we increase OUUC building rentals? And the answer to that was that OUUC building is more than 30 years old, and it does not meet current ADA requirements to be a site for a licensed preschool or daycare without building and outdoor improvements and additional storage space. The board charged a new rental task force to study all issues related to increasing rental revenue, and they will have a rental policy proposal for staff and the congregation in winter of 2024. Another question was, can we apply for grants from organizations supporting our work? The board does research which expenses could be funded by grants. We looked for grants for the HVAC, for example. Teams can do the same. The Environmental Action Team currently is investigating a grant for replacing and improving the aging solar panels on OUUC's roof. And they will bring their proposal to the board. The Healthy Congregations Team is looking into grant funding for congregational training about transforming conflict, and we will continue to explore grant options. Using outdoor space, if it aligns with our values, great. If they want to rent the space, we have to have a good rental policy so that we're covered as far as insurance and liability for things that happen on our property. Can we borrow money? Borrowing money for operating expenses would have to be secured by real property, which we just paid off. So this would have to be considered carefully. My original answer to this question was something along the lines of, heck no, but what about selling things to raise money? Car washes, bake sales, and the like, logo products. These kind of activities are great for building community, but they don't bring in much money. If you can even consider something very successful like the book sale, that takes a week weeks and weeks of labor. When we consider all the labor that goes in to put on that successful book sale, we're all contributing our labor at about $1 an hour. So the return on investment is, but they are great for building community and raising money for charitable purposes. So that is quite a wonderful thing. Plus the online book sale, all the proceeds from the online book sale go to OUUC operating budget. And she raises, about a third of what the fall book sale raises. And she doesn't, this is Susan Dodson, and she doesn't include any sort of deduction for her own time and effort in running that whole online book sale. Yay, Susan Dodson. So now, what about taking a larger percentage of social justice donations for church operations? Well, it's a high priority to continue OUUC's tradition of giving generously to social justice causes through Share the Plate and the book sale. Taking a larger percentage may help us in the short term, but we must consider how it will affect future donations. A question came on, when will we see training on charitable giving and tax benefits? And that is coming. The Legacy Giving Committee is working on this, and you can expect a class or session soon. I have seen outlines of some brochures and surveys that are going to come from the Legacy Giving Committee to inform people about giving, including OUUC and their will, that kind of thing. Having a very standard form and having it available and visible on a regular basis. So were there any other questions, those of you who have a copy of, I don't want to go through and read the whole thing. Did anyone have any questions about suggestions that were brought up during the?
Can I have Troy's mic? Yes. One question from online is there a copy of that report about the ADA and what improvements are needed for childcare, et cetera?
There is not a formal report. The idea of renting OUUC out to a school or preschool comes up every budget year since we've been here. And the last time this came up, as I understand it, staff researched it, and those are the conclusions they came to. So until there's again, it is a lot of work that we are not then devoting to our mission at OUUC. But if someone wants to do it, great. Any other questions? All right. So one thing we are, as far as having a dedicated fundraising team or committee, yes.
Just a thought about childcare and, renting for that service. I think that one thing, I'm sure people have thought about it, I just haven't, I don't know about it, but bringing in families and children and providing them a place here and a home here will probably bring in more members. I would think that would be something we would want to consider. Have we considered that in the past?
We've considered it every year since we've moved over here. Yes, Reverend Mary.
So if I might just say, I know that it might intuitively make sense that having a childcare or nursery or preschool on site would increase membership. And every single UU congregation that I know that has a school on site, it does not lead to increase in membership from families. It just doesn't. So it's a myth. And please let's not perpetuate that myth. I served at First Unitarian in Portland, which had a gigantic school. There were very few. In a school of 500 kids, there were maybe 2 that attended the congregation. It just doesn't happen. So it's not an outreach effort. And if I might just say what the barriers are to a school, actually before COVID, we were in discussions with an outdoor school that was looking to use our space. We have beautiful outdoor space. What they needed was storage inside, and the amount of storage that we would need to share, the OUC building doesn't have a lot of storage, and all of it was full. So it was really would have been a major task to move into that. The school didn't happen because of COVID. The biggest barrier is our outdoor playground space. It's on a hill. If you look out the back windows, the playground area that we have is not accessible in any way. And so we would have to totally rebuild an outdoor playground area, probably taking up parking lot space in order for that to happen. So those are pretty significant barriers. And so every year when this comes up, we can revisit the decision, but really I think it's wasted effort to hold on to the idea that there will be a preschool or a daycare at OUC in this building space.
Thank you, Reverend Mary. Couple of other things that came up to, yes.
Sorry, there was also a correction dropped in the chat online. Proceeds from the sale of collectible books on eBay go to the OUC operating budget. Proceeds from the SURF, now Showcase, online community book sales go to our nonprofit partners.
We're always sharing the plate, yes. Having a fundraising committee year-round. Many of us feel that stewardship and fundraising are year-round activities, not campaigns, but stewardship education, community building, and understanding the needs and wants of the OUUC organization. The board included such a committee of the board in the recent revision of its governance policy manual. The board hopes that this committee will have a charge and will accept candidates for appointment within the next year. As far as you will see that Reverend Mary has a great explanation of the reorganization of the budget to support the administrative work of OUUC. And it is by Rosie's window. And because we have Isaac and Rosie, we no longer have to have an outside bookkeeping company do our books. Isaac has taken that on, trained, and will be performing all those functions that an outside bookkeeper will do. Now, because of that, we've had to make some interesting adjustments in order for financial boxes to be checked and ticked. For example, he cannot write the checks and then approve them himself. So we have a member of the financial consulting team that comes in and actually approves the checks so that more than one set of eyes are on the expenses and things that go in and out of the office. Then can we charge for educational classes or for choir program participation? Well, actually, educational classes and the choir program are all part of Reverend Mary's responsibility for programming. So she responded that OUC currently asks for donations for adult and children's programs, and choir members are also invited and encouraged to pledge whether they are members or not. The reality is we could not charge enough to support these programs. Classes in choir are an important part of our heritage and our programming, and they're dependent on pledge income. So not charging fees makes classes in choir accessible and easier to administrate. If we charged, we would need a process for waiving the fees, which means we have to use staff time to come up with forms and track. And yeah, so it will cost us more than it's worth. Yes, Joe?
To interrupt, but I think we're getting late, and so
Yes.
if we could move on to the
Thank you.
the budget.
These are our current OUUC employees. And Reverend Mary,
Yeah, thank you, Arlene. One of the things that I took away from the Bridging the Gap congregational conversation was that there was some misunderstanding about the staff. And I will say the suggestions about decreasing staff, decreasing benefits were hard for staff to hear that day because we were in the building doing our job that day. And so I wanted to take some time to just note who's on staff and also mention a couple folks that we have as consultants. So one of the folks not on the slide you'll see is Kate McHugh, who's back at the tech desk today with Teresa. And Kate is somebody that we have in order to have a good bench for technology support along with our volunteers. So I just thought it might be helpful for me to go through for you to see who the staff are and to talk a little bit about who's full-time, who's part-time, and what this looks like. So Reverend Sarah and I are the only OUC employees who are full-time. Everyone else is part-time. The next few people, Isaac, Troy, and Marie, are half-time, which means that they are also eligible for OUC benefits, retirement and life insurance and disability and healthcare, along with Reverend Sarah and I. So there's 5 of us who are eligible for benefits. There are 2 of us who do not take health insurance benefits because our health insurance is covered elsewhere. So if all 5 of us took the health insurance benefit that we're eligible for, it would actually cost OUC about $15,000 more per year than it currently does. The rest of the staff, Rosie, Anissa, Teresa, Carbon, the childcare staff, and Kate, are part-time, less than 20 hours, which means that they're not eligible for benefits. It's currently 20 hours a week or more. And as Arlene mentioned, there's been some confusion about why did it take 2 people to replace Darlene and what was the cost of that. What I did in replacing Darlene was to take the total amount of the compensation package for Darlene, supplement that a little bit with funds that were being used elsewhere and had not been allocated, and created a half-time position for Isaac, a business manager, and the very part-time position for Rosie. What we did when our bookkeeper said they weren't going to be a bookkeeper anymore was that we took money that we would pay our out-of-state bookkeeper and put that into hours for Isaac. And so what's happened then is the amount that it costs for Isaac and Rosie was totally within the amount that's in the current budget, and actually bringing the bookkeeping in-house costs less than it did to have a contractor off-site. So in total, the amount of increase that is required to maintain the current staff that we have for next year is 1% over last year. And that's primarily because of bringing the bookkeeping in-house, which means that money came out of the resource ministry budget and into personnel. And the health insurance cost, that was 10% this last year. So that 10% is allocated to the amount that OUUC covers, which is 80% of our health insurance bill, and the 20% that staff pay, it was a 10% increase overall. So I really encourage you, if you have questions about Isaac and Rosie and how that worked and what they do, we created a good handout that's on the desk outside of Rosie's office. Please take a look at that, and please go by and say hello. They've really done a wonderful job, I think, of stepping in and learning the culture and learning the jobs that we've asked them to do at OUUC. So I hope that helps a little bit with the staffing and what that looks like. Are there any questions that you have about the current staff or what the staffing pay and benefits looks like?
Hi, Reverend Mary, it's Steve Tilley. I just asked Rosie for the handout. She doesn't have one.
Huh. Well, they were in a holder, and it was from what was published in the weekly update. So I can certainly check with Rosie when I'm back again and see. But I'm sorry that maybe copies aren't there. They certainly should be. Hi, Rosie. I saw Rosie just came on.
I don't know. She, but she doesn't know if she's supposed to give them out. You might talk to her.
Yeah, I would say check again, Steve. They were in a holder right on the shelf outside of Rosie's desk. Rosie,
Hi.
yeah.
Can you guys hear me? So I think what he's talking about is the budget handout that someone mentioned I would have that I don't have. I do have the handout about me and Isaac, and it's here at my desk.
Thank you, Rosie, for clarifying that. Are there any other questions about the staff? Okay, so then if we could move on to the next slide. So just a little bit more then as we go into the budget. Even with maximizing the revenue and minimizing the expenses, there was still a gap between revenue and expenses in the proposed budget of about almost $32,000. And so what we are proposing is to use some savings, primarily the legacy gift from George Lanning and an endowment draw for this next fiscal year. So then with the next slide, a couple things to just note. The mortgage is paid off. Thank you very much for the very successful capital campaign. That takes about $45,000 out of the operating budget to have the mortgage paid off, and we can use those funds for other things. There's a minimum budget for most programs. The board proposed and approved a 3% cost of living increase for staff. And the childcare staff get minimum wage, which also went up this year. The board also approved a pay increase for Reverend Sarah and I. I had asked for a pay increase for Reverend Sarah. The board discusses and proposes pay increases for the minister. This budget also restores the professional expenses for Reverend Sarah and I. We cut each of ours in half for this current year in order to help balance the budget last year. And it increases the dues to the UUA to $10,000 from the $5,000 that we have currently. So I'm going to ask the tech team then if you could pull up the handout of the proposed budget so that we can look at that together. And I think it's also in the chat. This is also on the website, so you can pull up everything there. Wonderful, thank you. So you'll see the column, the proposed budget on the far right as you're facing the screen is what the board approved last week on the 21st of May. It has the stewardship income that we talked about. We assume that 97% of the pledges will be fulfilled an increase in auction and income from the investments that Jeff has been making. It includes a draw from the endowment. The 17,000 is Jeff's estimate based on the current endowment amount, and then a legacy gift amount of almost 17.5, for a total operating budget of 494,000. And then these are the program expenses and ministry areas that would be funded. There's fundraising and a board discretionary amount. In the spiritual life area, there's a music budget that is definitely more robust than it has been, although less than requested. And then the worship arts budget includes some programming costs, like the purchase of the Soul Matters packets that we use for our monthly themes, as well as payment for our guest speakers. And this assumes that all of the guest speakers during my sabbatical will be paid out of the sabbatical fund. For faith development, family ministry and adult education got a little bit less than asked for, not as much, at least the amount that they got this year. The community life budget includes the Thursday evening dinners. Reverend Sarah tells me that right now the Thursday evening dinners are just about breaking even. The amount of donations we're getting is just about covering the costs. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there have been Thursday evening takeovers. The board and Lush and other, the environmental action team, a number of teams actually did the preparation and for the Thursday dinner, so that helped a lot with cost. Faith in Action includes the share the plate, as well as benevolences that Faith in Action gives away, and Faith in Action programming. And then the resource ministry is all of the building related things. It's utilities and maintenance and cleaning supplies, hospitality like the coffee in the kitchen, all of our office supplies, the 10,000 in dues to the UUA, and then excuse me, the fees and insurance. And then, as you would expect in a program-sized church, the bulk of the budget is personnel. And this is the amount. I thought it might be helpful for you to see what the breakdown is for salary and wages, taxes, benefits, and health insurance coverage. So it's about 24,000, almost 25,000 over last year's budget, and that's an increase of about 4.4%. So that's what the proposed budget looks like for this coming year. So I would just open it up for questions then. Are there things that you'd like more information about, or questions or comments that you'd like to make?
Especially if you haven't seen these before.
So, can you hear me on site?
Is the plan still in place to go to services?
This budget does not include funding for 2 services. Yes.
What is the cost of adding a second service?
somewhere around $6,800 in extra expenses, which would add to our gap at the bottom there, which would put us over $32,000 of gap. And our objective was to reduce the gap year after year. So at this time, the board decided not to fund two services. That would start in January, yeah,
And Reverend has her hand up.
yes.
Thank you. So if I might just expand on that a little bit, the amount, the 6,500 that I proposed to the board was to begin two services next January after my sabbatical is done. That's not something you do when your minister's on sabbatical. It would be about $10,000 a year for an entire church year, for actually an entire fiscal year to go to two services. And my impression of the board discussion was that it was weighing what are the things that are most important, and the board decided to not fund two services. So I see Harthorn's
One more
question.
question. Is the amount of 6,800 to go to two services per year or just per service day?
The 6,500 Harthorn was to go to two services starting in January of 2025. So it would fund two services for about half of the year. It's about $10,000 to go to two services for the entire year. So maybe it would help to say a second service costs $10,000 for the year. Does that help?
And we do not usually do two services in the summer months because we don't have the number of congregants in the summer months. So it would still probably be a single service in the summer months.
So I'll just say, I only had 7 months of
Okay,
in-person
so
service.
Zoe here. I really want to commend the board and Reverend Mary for this budget. I think, a lot of it hurts, but I really appreciate you lifting up the staff because we don't have this community without the staff. And there's still a lot to be done on that front. I know that there's been talk about decreasing the gap, and I remember the board meeting that I attended a couple of months ago, Jeff talking about kind of a 5-year plan to decrease the amount of money that we draw down and increasing finances. So again, I'm a planful sort, and so I'm just wondering where you are in the planning process to, put together a concrete 5-year plan to do that.
We moved as a board to adopt a plan laid out by Jeff. And it's in our minutes but we do that as a board internal goal, and then we let you know what we're doing. But as far as it being part of Reverend Mary is responsible for a lot of the long-term planning of programming at the church. And we are responsible for making sure that the money is raised so that that can happen. Yes,
I don't have a question.
hold it close.
I have a comment or an observation. I'm no budget expert, but it seems to me that this has been handled in such a thoughtful and heartfelt way, and I'm impressed.
Reverend Mary and Reverend Sarah are significantly underpaid according to the index for the UUA for people living in this area. You know, it's very expensive to live in this area. And since Reverend Mary was hired 5 years ago, she has not got a raise, not a single raise. So we decided this year that she lifted up Sarah to get a raise, and we said, well, not unless both of you get a raise, so. You're, okay, sorry, yep, she's catching up. I think all we have to do is extinguish the chalice, for those of you who wish to stay to do that.
So let me add my thanks to everyone for your engagement and your questions and your thoughtfulness and your appreciation. This is not an easy process and discussion and having to weigh decisions. And so thank you for that. So as we extinguish our chalice, I would invite us to just take a breath and step back from the details. Because while the details are important, we can retain our big vision of a world that is loving, just, and healthy. So may the flame of our chalice remind us of our commitment to that shared vision. Thank you all.